with adoption of the agenda. Motion.
So.
All in favor?
Aye.
So funny doing that to Ms. Rios. Ask for approval of the minutes. Motion. Move.
Second.
Safety briefing, Jody Brooks.
Good afternoon, Chair Warren, and committee members and other board members present. Safety is a key value here at JEA, and we start our meetings with a safety briefing. In the event of an emergency, JEA Security will call 911. And thank you. The safety briefing for headquarters is online or on the screen, but just as a reminder that should there be an emergency from an evacuation route, there is construction going on inside this office, this meeting room. So just be cautious of your surroundings. But if for some reason we have to evacuate, we're going to go out, exit Pearl Street, the main entrance, go across and assemble in front of the courthouse. If you require medical assistance, notify a security officer. Please silence phones and computers. And I think we're in good stead to thanks.
Thank you. Public comments? None?
Mr. Chair, let me just ask a question. As the board members who are not committee members, and we attend these committee meetings, do we vote? Do we not vote? What is the?
The members of the committee vote and offer motions. The others are allowed to participate, but the action is taken by the committee.
Okay, so we don't vote, we can.
Correct. Participate.
Curious, thank you.
Thank you. Good question. We have a amended and restated interagency agreement. Joe?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, committee, and board members. I am here to present the amended and restated interagency agreement. And this is an action item for the committee. The current interagency agreement dates back to March of 2016. Melissa actually provided me an old presentation that we've been doing these interagency agreements dating back to 1979. Interesting factoid. The 2016 agreements, the current agreement that's in place, it's been amended several times. It included a formula-based calculation based on millage and KWH sales, and also contains a 1% minimum contribution. The amendments included additional contributions, 15 million and change, and 12.5 million in fiscal years 2019 and 2022. What's also interesting to note is that an additional 15 million was contributed at the time the 2016 agreement was executed, bringing the total to 42.5 million. The 155,000 was for some river monitoring equipment, but the 42.5 million was used to be used by the city for septic tank phase outs. The agreement also contained a reservation and transfer of BMAT, water quality credits. That's the Basin Management Action Plan for the Lower St. Johns River Basin. It's a mouthful. Easier to just say BMAT. Water credits to the city from JEA. And then we would continue to cooperate on city sewer projects. The charter contains a provision that if the council doesn't reconsider the existing contribution agreement, that the formula contained and minimum 1% escalator would remain in place. And when this agreement expired in September 2023, we continued to make contributions such that the contribution amount in 2024 was $123.6 million. Again, that's based on a 1% minimum escalator. So key provisions of the agreement that's included in this package is a 5-year term It's retroactive to October 1, 2024, which again is, will bridge the September 2023 date and the new agreement. The annual quality credits, again, water quality credits, 45.34 metric tons per year of nitrogen. That equates to just under $5 million a year annually. These credits would continue until September of 2033. And we would provide an additional 35 to 45 metric tons, again, based on availability. And again, if the city were to take the full 45, that would be roughly another $5 million. So it'd be about a $10 million contribution of these credits to the city each year. The extension and additional credits must comply with applicable local, state, and federal laws with authority provided by the appropriate regulatory agencies. A critical component of the amended and restated agreement is the payment of these contribution amounts. 2026 jumps off the page. It is an additional $40 million above the amount that we calculate for 2026, and I'll deal with that now. So the 25 contribution amount is approximately 137.4 million. That was set last year, and it was based on the audited contribution amount in fiscal year 2023 of 122.4 million plus an additional 15 million. That is the 25 amount, and then that sets the baseline for increasing the payments annually at 1%. But in 26, we made an additional $40 million contribution. And these amounts were established through negotiations between the mayor's administration and the leadership team here at JA. Where are we coming up with this 40 million? A significant majority of the amount, 36 million, is coming from the debt, the bond offering that we did for the electric system back in September of last year that we closed October 1st. The additional 4 million roughly is coming from revenues that we achieved last year for fiscal year 24 that were above budget amount. We did have KWH sales that were about 500,000 higher than what we had budgeted in fiscal year 24. And a rule of thumb, for every 100,000 KWH sales we have above the budget, creates about $8 million of additional revenue. So we did file budget amendments recently and got council's approval to transfer that money to the electric system. A portion, the total budget amendment, I believe, was 61 million. 40 of that is attributed to these revenues, additional revenues. And based on the current electric system forecast, that 26 contribution will represent about 8.9% of total revenues. Fitch tracks this annually. The median figure that they released last year was 7% for AA rated electric utilities. That number is a little bit high, but from a historical perspective, it's our actuals in the past. And in fact, fiscal year 2027 will be approximately 6.7% of total. So once we get beyond this payment, the contribution will be in line with our peers, again, per Fitch ratings. So staff's recommending that the Finance, Governance, and Audit Committee approve it and move it forward to the board. With that, I'll entertain any questions.
So Joe, if hypothetically, if we are doing lower contribution to the city, would that be a foot shot from the rating agency's perspective then? Is there a sweet spot where they're looking for a contribution, amount or?
They publish these medians, Chair DeSalvo. we tend to use the medians as a guidepost. We tend not to deviate too much. So to have a number that's in line, that they will look at a one-time contribution as simply as that. And we do provide forecast information that'll show that 6.7 and a declining number actually going forward because revenues are increasing due to rate increases that are projected. So it's a good question. They don't like to see the percentage get significantly higher than the norm.
And the cities is cognizant of that? Okay.
They are, and we've made them aware of these medians in the past, and they look at it as well.
So I don't understand the negotiation. Why would we give them 15 million or 26? And then why would we give them 40?
Well, it's hard for me to answer that. I would say that subject to negotiation, and the city has talked about some budget challenges that they have, and the media has picked up on that. And all things being considered, we would be in a better position not to contribute the additional 15 million and 40 million. I guess it's where the negotiation.
That the reason for doing it is to work with the city whenever we can.
Correct. While not getting significantly harmed in each system. And the water system's proportionate share of the contribution is about 29%, electric 71%, water 29%. That's based on total revenues of each system. Water's percentage, amounts to about 5.5% of the total revenue. So it's a slightly smaller amount for water. But these negotiations, I hesitate to use negotiate, but because council ultimately is the arbiter.
Kurt?
Through the chair, excuse me, Kurt Wilson, JA, and I'm happy to answer. The negotiation started with a previous leadership team in late 2023. And at the time, the previous CEO had set some initial expectations on between a 3 to 9 year interlocal agreement, if you will. And by year 9, our bottom line would have jumped almost 100 million. So it was going up in small increments. The news presented on this in the past, but it jumped small increments, but then it jumped into significance, 20 million this year, 30 million this year. Year 9 was like 65 million. So when we went in after the leadership change, there was an expectation that that's where we were at, and basically started from zero. So there was like a wholesale reset, if you will, on where we were, what was promised under the previous leadership, to what the financial realities of what we can support today. And that's where we ended up with the 40 million. The ask was kind of buy-in points out of a mortgage. A one-time down payment keeps us out of escalating costs year over year. That would never go down. What does that number look like? What would the city need? And that's how we ended up with that.
The mayor's administration has also commented that they would have, I guess they would have preferred to see the 40 million spread over 4 years. We felt like we had the funding source identified and prefer to do it all at once. Thank you, Kurt.
And that escalator would have continued to build year over year on top of that 40 million. So really that was the negotiation, was to make a one-time payment and not have it go as a part of the baseline.
My understanding is there was a fairly complicated formula before. This just simplifies it.
Correct.
Thanks to you and Ted, your team's work, we were able to pay that additional money because of the de-risking.
The bond offering back in September, that's correct.
Any other questions, comments? I'll call for a motion to accept these, the amended agreement.
Move the motion.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Gentlemen, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
We have a 450, it'll begin, 457 deferred compensation plan. This is an action item. Diane?
Thank you. Diane Moser, Chief Human Resources Officer. A little bit about our benefits area led by Carl Becker. Our benefits consist of health and welfare benefits, deferred compensation savings plans, annual leave, and holidays. The focus is to offer benefits that have attractive design and structure, along with being cost competitive. Our benefits comply with federal and Florida state laws and regulations. Occasionally, there are changes to these benefits, and they occur through revised or new laws and or additions and or modifications to remain competitive. So this will be an action item. I do think it's a lot simpler than what we just discussed with Joe. So JEA is the plan sponsor of the 457 Deferred Compensation Plan, and this is provided to all employees. It's basically the public sector's version of a 401k in the private sector. Tax deferred contributions are made by the employee into a retirement account administered by a vendor, and our vendor is Empower Financial Services. The JEA does not make contributions into this account. It's only the employee making the contribution. This retirement plan is optional, and there are mandatory retirement plans. So there are currently 1,000 employees contributing to the deferred compensation plan. The maximum annual amount an employee under the age of 50 can contribute to the plan is $23,500. Plan currently allows a participant who attains age 50 or older to make an additional contribution of $7,000 annually, and that would be a total of $31,000. That's called a catch-up contribution. Congress amended the existing law effective January 1st, 2025, so literally just last month, to increase the amount of the permissible catch-up contribution for a participant who attains ages 60 to 63. And this is called the super catch-up contribution. For 2025, the super catch-up limit is $11,250. And this amount is subject to an annual adjustment for the Consumer Price Index. There are currently 110 employees in this age group contributing to the plan. Beyond age 63, there's a special catch-up, and it's 2 times the maximum amount of those who are under 50, and that amount is $47,000. So the addition and implementation of the super catch-up contributions in the plan will not result in any increased plan administration costs or expenses to JEA. And we are requesting that the super catch-up amendment is passed. Again, it's a cost to the employee only, and that's initially out of their paycheck, but then they get the benefit when they retire.
Diane, any questions?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Internal audit update, an internal audit charter action item. Lee?
Good afternoon, Chair, members, board members. Lee Montanez, Director of Internal Audit and Enterprise Risk. Starting off with my 3 items, the first one is an internal audit update. And with that, I wanted to provide you with an update of our internal audit plan for this first quarter. And for this first quarter, we have some recurring activities we do every year, starting with our external audit support of the EY audit. We provided 2 staff members and around 450 hours of support to that audit. We also provide support of 2 staff members and around 300 hours of support to the Energy Authority member review audits. And we generally complete those audits that are fiscal year 24 audits. So we completed the contract audit on electric services and district energy and learning and development. We have other audits that are in different stages, and these are fiscal year 25 audits. Going a little deeper into the audits that were completed this first quarter, I did want to highlight the contract audit for electric system. It was rated well managed. And for this one, the group did a good job of monitoring the equipment hours and the labor hours associated with the project. The key observation was around the payment, and the invoice lacked some information on the model number and the rate for that invoice. For learning and development, the rating was satisfactory. What we found as a good practice was that the learning and development team do reach out and do employee surveys and feedback to determine what courses the employees need. As a key observation, they haven't completed a critical needs assessment since year 2020. Lastly, the contracts audit around district energy was rated satisfactory. The project engineering and construction team implemented a project management information system that will streamline the project administration for this. The key observation had to do with vendor submitted invoices that did not include the proper documentation.
Hey, Lee, for the critical needs assessment, is there a JEA policy or guidance on how often it's supposed to be done? Or seems like 2020 seems like a long time, or is this just that the right period for doing this?
I will need to get back on you. I don't think there is a policy for that. If it were, we would have noted it here. No policy.
Thanks.
Open and closed action plans. We currently have 43 total action plans that are open. All these action plans are on track. We follow with leadership on a quarterly basis, and they provide us with an action plan update for all of these. Fiscal year to date, we've closed 9 action plans. And as part of those closed action plans, I want to highlight 2. One is from the receivables and collections audit, where policies and procedures were updated to include processes related to the kiosks and point of sale devices. The other one had to do with sales tax audit, where sales tax refund process was added to the tax department responsibilities. The second item on my list was an internal audit charter update. The Institute of Internal Audit revised in fiscal year in 2024 their global audit standards. And this was a robust transformation of the framework that governs internal audit. Due to the significant changes of these standards, updates to the charter were necessary to increase clarity, enforceability, relevance, and alignment. And significant changes to the charter were in the following areas. First, my responsibilities as director are now better defined in the charter, including updating my responsibilities to include setting strategic goals, reporting the conformance of staff to the principles of ethics, tracking performance metrics, and implementing a quality assurance program. The charter has been updated to add specific ethics, professionalism, and independence responsibilities to the audit staff for increased accountability. One of the strategic shifts in the updates of the standards was the explicit involvement of the committee. As such, the charter was updated to better define the committee's role in the oversight of the audits, of our internal audits, independence, support, and enhanced communication. And then finally, minor changes were made to update the committees' names and titles. As part of your packet, there is the updated charter and the current charter. For your review, staff requests the committee recommend the board the approval of the internal audit charter.
Any questions? Mr. Moffitt has.
Make a motion to approve?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
One question, though, I don't know if Salvo brought it up. Assessment, critical needs assessment hasn't been done since 2020. In your opinion, should it be done on a regular basis and be part of our rules and regulations?
I do believe so. It ties into the strategies of the organization and where they believe the needs of training needs to be at.
If I could just add, sir, we are looking at specifically management training as well. So that was an initiative that was taken up just several months ago, our training department, to start coming up with those critical needs and doing it on a regular basis.
We'll bring it back to this committee at some point.
Usually it's internal, but we can if you want.
Well, if you want to actually add it to the qualifications in the bylaws, obviously this, but not bylaws, but the rules and regs, we can bring it here and then take it forward if you want to make a specific recommendation of timing on that.
Okay, we'll get with you on that and see how we can.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
The last item I have for discussion is the enterprise risk management roadmap. During my last meeting, I presented a roadmap on how we redevelop enterprise risk management. We have 5 steps here, and as part of that process, we're still working on step 1. And for your consideration today is the development or the approval of the enterprise risk management policy. The policy is this first deliverable in order for us to get enterprise risk management up and running. And, as part of this policy, we have the policy statement, the objectives, the framework. We're going to be using the COSO framework for ERM. The assignment of responsibilities, we're going to be creating a committee in order to discuss ERM with clear responsibilities on ownership of risks. And then we're going to have the risk management committee for that conversation, that discussion. Policy is included as part of your supplemental materials. And at this time, we also recommend that the board approve the enterprise risk management policy.
Anyone on the board have any questions? Comments? Call a motion.
Move the motion.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Approved.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda, warehouse lease extension. Jordan, present.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon. In March of 2023, JEA executed a sublease with AAR Government Services Incorporated for a 100,000 square foot warehouse facility near the Westlake Industrial Area. That was to address increased JEA inventory needs that were caused by supply chain disruptions. The space currently holds approximately $30 million in JEA storm stock and construction project materials. The current sublease expires in March of 2025, next month, and JEA has negotiated an extension through March of 2028. This negotiated extension also includes an additional 23,000 square feet of warehouse space for JEA's use. JEA's maximum indebtedness for the 3-year term is $3,836,215, which requires the board's approval as it exceeds the $2 million threshold. So staff is requesting that the committee recommend board approval of the proposed lease as outlined in Resolution 2025-04. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Comments? Yes, sir, Mr. Baker.
Jordan, help me with the arithmetic. Somewhere in the documents, it looked like that the new rent was about $7 a foot.
Yes, sir.
How could the 3-year rent escalate to over $10? on average?
So the maximum indebtedness includes the base rent, the utilities, which are at 42 cents a square foot, as well as the common area maintenance. So it includes taxes, insurance, and CAM.
Okay. I got
So,
you.
so the contract has to include all of those things for the maximum indebtedness. So the base rent would be much lower than that.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Anyone else? Gentlemen?
Which is the key.
The CAM, I'll call it OpEx because we have CAM taxes, insurance included. So in the first year, it's 225 a square foot. It will be based on the actual costs. We assumed a 15%, which seems a little high, but our insurance rate is very favorable right now. So we wanted to account for any significant adjustments, knowing the insurance market is what it is.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
You move the motion?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Approved. All right, this is an information piece, Ted Phillips, about our upcoming rate hearing.
Yes. Thank you, Chair. So as you're aware, we've been talking about our rate adjustment and structure changes for both the water and electric system. We did a workshop with the whole board back the end of October. At your last board meeting, you called for a public hearing that will take place at next week's board meeting. We just wanted to take a few minutes this afternoon, and Victor's going to go through a presentation, not nearly as long as the workshop back in October, I promise, but just to allow the committee to express any concerns or ask any questions before we go into the public hearing on next Tuesday. And with that, I'll turn it over to Victor.
Thank you, Ted. Good afternoon, committee chair, board members. As Ted mentioned earlier, we're going to make this as brief as possible, but we're open to take any questions that you may have for us. As a reminder, when we take a look at our rates, this is always our strategic goals, is to make sure we're achieving our targeted revenues to meet our budgets. And during the process, look to see if there's any opportunities to improve our rate structures and update the tariffs accordingly. So let's start with the electric system recommendations. Our recommendations overall have remained the same since our board workshop in October. As you can see here, our recommendations continue to be a 6% in rate revenues, which is an adjustment versus our need of 35.7. As I think it was spoken to earlier, we had higher than expected sales last year, which allows us to absorb some of these costs, which is why we're only recommending 25.2 million for FY25. And what this will allow us to do is to close the gap that we have with our current FY25 budget. For FY26, when we did our analysis of our cost of service compared to our projected revenues based off our rates, our recommendation is an additional 4.5% increase in our rate revenues, which will also put us back in rotation to have our following rate hearings after the budget is passed next year. So these are, just for our reminders, these are rate revenue increase recommendations. The impacts to the customer's bills will vary depending on their load profile and their usage behavior. But I will have a slide at the very end and kind of address where this lands with our residential customers. For the water sewer system, our recommendations also remain the same. Again, not going to get in great detail, but our analysis show that we need to have a $15.1 million mid-year increase, or 6%, which is annualized 3% for water sewer system. And as a reminder, which primarily is driven by our water system for our needs for FY25. In addition, for FY26, we also are recommending another 4.2% rate revenue adjustment for $22.8 million. Again, likewise on the electric side, this put us back in the right rotation with our budget. So along with the rate revenue increases, as we discussed in our workshop, we also saw a lot of opportunities to restructure our rates to be in line with best practices, our industry practices, for our rates and how we cover our costs. All of these recommendations can be found in the tariffs, in the red line tariffs. There's over 500 adjustments that's taken place when it comes to the pricing and over 6 rate restructuring. So a lot of work was put into it, and I'm happy to answer any of those questions as well. But to take a step back from all the rate revenue conversations, I still want to take a moment to revisit this slide here with the committee. And that is the value that we bring to our community, the Northeast border. And that is for the price of a hot latte, $5. We provide an invaluable service. And you can see these various options, 37 hours of cooking all the way to over almost 1,500 hours of watching television. And the same can be said for a water sewer system. A water sewer system, for the price of a bottle of water, $2 bottle of water, we provide our community 25 baths for that same price, 625 royal flushes. These are valuable services that we believe that we're offering to our community, and we're happy to serve our communities. And last but not least, when you put it all together, all of the recommendations that we've gone over since October, it still tells a great story about how we have stewarded our costs. You can see here, when we presented back in October, even with our rate revenue recommendations, our customer bills goes from 205 to 210 and some change in FY25 to 221 and some change in FY26. And even back in October, it shows us still in the lower tier of our peer utilities. Now, fast forward to today, quite has happened in the IU marketplace, where they have gone before the PSC and also have requested rate revenue increases. Duke Energy has received approval to raise their electric rates from 2025 to 2027. Temple Electric also has received approval from the PSC to raise their rates this year, already started in 2025. And even now, FP&L is seeking approval for base rate adjustments as well, starting in 26 to 27. All that to say is, at the end of the day, what we believe is will continue to be the lower tier, even after these increases come into effect for our fellow IOUs, which will put us near the bottom, not the bottom of our peer group this time in October.
Before we jump into the timeline that we still have in front of us, is there any questions from anyone that me and Victor could try to answer?
Yes, Mr. Baker.
Obviously, comparison to our peers is important, and we're doing very well. I would think this board should get information that shows some sort of a breakdown of why we're having to do these. You know, under the prior administration, the increases were projected to be much smaller. And even then, they were blaming 100% of it on Vogel. We've added a lot of people since then. And I think just as part of our due diligence, it would be great if we could get a one-pager showing why we need a 6 or 7% increase and then another 4 or 5 next year.
We'll be happy to provide that information.
Thank you.
When was the last rate increase? Many years ago.
Yes, for on the water sewer side, we have not touched rates since 2012. Now, on the electric side, we did have a minor adjustment last year, which was the first since, I think, 2016.
Well, I think Mr. Baker's got a good point. I'm sure staff can provide that. Go ahead, Joe.
Mr. Chair, in the electric system, clearly we would not be raising rates, maybe at all, if not for Vogel, the MEAG PPA, just to put that in perspective, I think I've said this before, but the capacity payment that we're paying Florida Power and Light for the sheer power purchase agreement, which is 200 megawatts, is roughly 17 million a year. And that's the capacity payment. That's what the rating agencies attribute to the debt service that we pay on that contract. The MEAG Vogel PPA has annual debt service north of 170 million. It's more than 10 times. Wow. And that goes into the denominator of the fixed charge coverage. We are solving for an A-rated range of 1.5 to 2 times. Pricing policy says 1.6 just to give us a little cushion, but we're at the low end of the A-rated. We think our other metrics more than make up for the fact that this one metric is single A as opposed to double A, but we don't see, we can't justify raising rates to get up to a 2 times coverage. It would cause significant additional rate increases. So we are at the lower end for electric, and as Ted pointed out, we'll provide a synopsis, but the capital program in water is driving the rate increases clearly. 1.7 billion over the next 3 years. Yeah, it's a significant, a lot of new debt.
Thank you.
Thank you. Victor, good job. I don't know who thought about putting the little cup of coffee in the middle, show what you pay for a cup of coffee versus the services.
I'm gonna give kudos to the customer relationship of communications, brand and communications department. It was a partnership, but it came out great. So thank you.
Yeah, no, that was, it brings the message home nicely, the value that the residents here get from the JDA. Thank you. All right. Thank you very much. Annual disclosure report. We've got Mr. Soto, manager.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I'm AJ Soto. I'm the debt manager here at JEA, and I'm here to talk about the exciting topic of annual disclosure report procedures. Okay. Each year, JEA is required to file annual disclosure reports with the Municipal Securities Rulemaking Board to comply with investor continuing disclosure obligations. ADRs contain financial and operating information for each of our systems and are included by reference in all of our bond issuance and reoffering documents. Federal anti-fraud laws apply to disclosures made by JEA in connection with bond offerings and required periodic filings. So a few things that board members may not do. Board members may not authorize disclosure you know to be materially false or misleading. May not authorize disclosure while recklessly disregarding facts that indicate there is a risk the disclosure is misleading, and must apply an elephant in the room standard. If you are aware of a pressing financial or operating issue, then you are responsible for knowing how those issues are disclosed to investors before authorizing the bond offering or disclosure. A couple steps board members can take include becoming familiar with disclosure documents and asking questions of the JEA leadership team or staff about the disclosure of any issue that might exist. Now, here's the good news. Board members can reasonably rely on staff to prepare disclosure materials. Delegation to staff is acceptable provided that a sound process is followed and they have the training necessary to competently meet JEA's requirements under federal and fraud laws. Board approved amended disclosure policies and procedures in May of 2022. These policies and procedures follow SEC guidance on the preparation of disclosure and guide staff in preparing disclosure materials. After the February 2025 board meeting, so next week, you'll be provided with electronic drafts of the ADRs to review and provide comment prior to adoption by the board at its March 2025 board meeting. Prior to the 2025 March board meeting, we will provide substantially final drafts that will include any changes to the versions that we'll be distributing next week. Our report to the board in March will state compliance with the disclosure policies and procedures and ask for approval of the ADR so they can be filed to meet our disclosure timeline. At next week's board meeting, we will also have our bond counsel, or representatives from our bond counsel, Nixon Peabody, here to provide disclosure training, formal disclosure training at that meeting as well. If at any time during your review you question the accuracy of the disclosures or believe there's a chance the disclosures are misleading, or simply have questions about the disclosures, please do not hesitate to reach out, because we are here to serve as a resource for you folks. Next. I'm happy to take any questions after I show this slide of the brief timeline of the ADR procedure. So we are discussing it at today's committee. We'll transmit it to you electronically after next week's board meeting. We'll have it for about a month. Then the board will vote, hopefully adopt it at its March meeting for us to be able to post on the Municipal Securities Rulemaking Board website, EMMA, for investors to be able to download it.
Any questions?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. AJ, have we had the required disclosure training before? That seems new.
The board has had the required training before, and we are attempting to keep up with our policy of conducting it every 2 years. So we're due.
Okay. Anything else? Thank you very much.
Just a
Mr.
comment.
Becker, sure.
They're long and tedious reports, but I think it's important for members to take the time to go through them, because it's like an annual report, JEA, and I've always found it to be very helpful in understanding what goes on.
Not because I'm the person that puts them together, but I wholeheartedly agree with that statement. These annual reports can serve as a really beneficial cheat sheet for the board, if you will, because there's so much granular detail that goes into customer counts, what facilities we have in each system, things that are credit ratings, things that are useful, hopefully for you folks as you decision items that we bring for you here and as you engage in discussions with external stakeholders.
Mr. Chair, can I add, my background is largely prior to joining JA with SEC with public companies, and I would put these ADRs against any 10K that I've ever prepared or read. They're well done, and we are delighted to have Nixon Peabody back as our bond counsel. Thank you, sir.
Good job. Thank you very much. Any questions? Any other comments? Go to the next item is the developing an unbeatable team. Jody Brooks.
And the biggest part of our team is the JEA board. And every year you're required to do an annual evaluation based upon your policies. And I'm happy to be able to present the results of the evaluation based upon 24 criteria that each of the board members were asked to rate. They're rating between 1 and 5, 1 being strongly disagree, 5 being strongly agree. And we captured the results on an average basis. On average basis, we captured the results of the evaluation. You'll see the scoring of each of the criteria, the 24 different items. And I'll let you read these at your leisure, but I wanted to point out a couple of things that the board members either quoted or some of the scoring. One of them is the understanding that a little bit. All right, start off on the wrong slide. On the very first criteria talks about orientation of the board members and whether or not you believe you're given value, orientation. And the quote there, that there's now a much better process with numerous staff members and briefings for board meetings. We are working on an orientation book and making sure you get adequate materials and are working with Melissa and the team. From a governance perspective, we want you to be fully up to speed and what your mission is and getting oriented to JEA, because it is a complicated business. The second criteria that I wanted to just point out was at the bottom, JA's financial reports and annual budget. Kudos to member Morales and Baker about the presentations that the finance team is giving to the board and making sure you're getting the valuable information that you're requesting, and that finance is doing a good job. Another quote that I picked up on the evaluations, I think board members are getting better, but not sure. SLT is getting better at briefing these complicated areas, so we're headed in the right direction. Another member quoted, yes, I think we now have a much better process to report financial status at every board meeting. Each of the comments that were given, the evaluations are captured in this table. We didn't leave out any comments, so good, bad, ugly. They're all in the comments that you can read. But for the most part, everything was very positive. I think you guys are doing a really good job as a board, and you guys will be more too. The next one I wanted to point out, 5 out of 5, about having a strong working relationship with the CEO. A couple of quotes there, since all board members have a good open lines of communication with CEO. And I know the CEO works hard on her end. I thought that was a good quote, but from a communication standpoint with the CEO, you scored a 5 out of 5, so that sense was accurate. Another score of a 4.1, actively self-educate and stay current on industry trends. There was a yes, but quote, yes, but only as much as a part-time volunteer can be for industries as complicated as power generation, water, sewer, and distribution of these different product lines. Again, the staff is here to help. We try to stay ahead of the industry and making sure that we're knowledgeable on things that are happening, all the disciplines on water, electric, and wastewater. There is a lot happening and happens fast. But if you have questions or, we're always here as a resource, as AJ said on the ADRs. Always come to us if you feel like you get a little bit more education. I just got a couple more that I'm going to go through. Board briefing packets in advance of meetings. How are we doing on that front? I want to thank Melissa and her group for getting the materials out in a timely fashion, making sure you got the information. We are working on a bigger, better process, but again, sometimes things get changed out at the last minute, and we try to prevent those things from happening, but hoping that you get the resources within that 7-day time frame that were required. And then lastly, just the overall score, if you were to average all the averages, is a 4.725. So you guys are doing pretty well from a scale of 5. And then just a couple of wrap-up comments I think are important. A couple of the members talked about the current board is very collaborative, and everyone steps up when needed and they ask the hard questions. So I think that's very important for the JA board, and that the team is as transparent. There's another transparency quote that someone made that I thought was very telling. So with that, if you guys have any questions about your evaluation and how you guys think you're doing.
Yes, sir, Mr. Baker.
Cody, the question about staying up with industry changes, you might look for a one-pager somewhere that in each board package, it's part of the presentation that we just get an update of what's happening in the industry that we might not read about in Wall Street Journal.
That's a great idea. I love that idea because again, we're so in tune with it, but not necessarily telling you what we're seeing. I think that's a great suggestion.
Yeah, 2 things. First, I think these are pretty valuable, and I just encourage board members, if you see something, don't wait till the annual evaluation, because this team here with Vicky and the senior leadership team, they're all ears, so don't wait for something, that you see. Number 2, and just a shout out to Melissa just for the support she gives us board members. It's incredible. A lot of work, but just we really appreciate what you and whoever helps you do this stuff. Melissa, thanks.
And she had to prepare for 3 committee meetings today.
Any other comments, questions? To the Evaluation, I just want, this is outstanding staff. We added Diane Charles recently. I just think it keeps getting better. Now, for old or other new business. Or anyone? Okay, our next meeting is August 11th. What? Well, this is August 11th. Yeah, I think we're all meeting next week. August 11th. And if there's no other comments or questions, adjourn. Thank you.